In Season 2 of Alice in Borderland, we find out exactly how these players are able to enter these games and share these similar experiences in this strange new world. But in Season 3 of Alice in Borderland, we figure out why. And that is because of a concept known as the collective unconscious, which, at least in this show, is a place that everybody can go when they experience some kind of near-death event. Now, if you've never heard about this concept before, I'm sure the first time you watched the show, you probably thought it was pretty woo-woo, but what if I told you that this is actually a psychologically derived concept and something that we can see play out in our lives consistently on a day-to-day basis? I hope I piqued your interest because in this video, we are going to definitely have some fun. But without further ado,
the game will now begin.
Hi everybody, my name is Sabrina. For those who don't know me, I'm a clinical psychologist, and on this channel I talk about psychology as we see it in popular Netflix TV series and films. And today I'll be referencing the incredible series Alice in Borderland, which came out with its newest season, Season 3, out only on Netflix. And there won't be spoilers for Season 3, as I know some of you might not have watched it yet, but there will be for Seasons 1 and 2. So if you haven't watched it, and you think even a small part of you wants to, then please go and watch it. And if you did like Squid Game, you will most definitely love this show, but I will absolutely not be comparing the two in this video today because I hate how often they're both compared. They're both incredible series in their own right. So just go and watch it. So like I mentioned in the intro, today we'll be talking about the collective unconscious. This was first discovered by Carl Jung, who was a psychiatrist and psychoanalyst, and actually a collaborator with Freud, but they broke off because they had such wildly different ideas about the human psyche, one of them being the collective unconscious. And so both Jung and Freud did agree on a personal unconscious. And those are things like forgotten memories or repressed memories or events and certain repressed desires. Freud goes a little farther in that and talks about like us repressing socially unacceptable desires, typically sexual or aggressive in nature, as well as unresolved conflicts that we might have. But because it's the personal unconscious, that means that it is personal. It is only for the individual and it varies person to person. So again, they both agree on that, but Freud only really believed in the personal subconscious, the personal unconscious, but Carl Jung believed in what's known as a collective unconscious. So what this is a deeper universal layer shared by all humans. This is not at all shaped by nature like the personal unconscious would be, but it's rather something that we inherit as part of being human beings. And as part of the collective unconscious, he talks a lot about what's known as archetypes. What those are either symbols or patterns or descriptions of things, depictions of things that are the same no matter what culture, no matter what part in history. And there are a couple examples of this. So for instance, the archetype of the hero, right? So we have people like in the Odyssey, we have Odysseus as the hero figure, or we even have Luke Skywalker in Star Wars, or we have Black Panther, for instance. So having a lot of these stories that have some kind of hero figure, and then another archetype is basically the villain figure. So a person that typically represents that shadowy, dark, repressed traits, the kind of darker part of human nature that we don't often like to come out, or maybe we don't have it come out in full force like they do in a villain character where it's just evil. And so there's typically that character. Then there's also the archetype of the wise old man or the wise old woman. We also have the mother figure. Often in a lot of stories or movies or art or whatever, we can see somebody who's more motherly. And then there's often a person who is the trickster, right? Think of Loki, for instance, in the Avengers, who I love Loki, by the way. But we often have a trickster character who I will talk more about this because it's very, very relevant to especially Season 3 of Alice in Borderland, this newest season. Now, we often see these archetypes all over in things like the myths that we have, or books or fairy tales, movies, art, religion, dreams, etc. And what Jung would say is the fact that we have this in so many different mediums and in so many different cultures all across history He believes that as humans, we are kind of pulling from the same symbolic reservoir, that we're kind of drawing from the same well of stories. Now, I want to talk about how this differs from how it's depicted in Alice in Borderland, or how they explain it in Alice in Borderland. So, in that story, yes, you do have a large group of people that are sharing a certain experience, right? You have all the players that gather to these specific arenas and they play the same games together, they go through the same things together. But the big difference is that we can consciously tap into this. Like, especially in season 3, we do see that, and this isn't a spoiler because this was in the trailer as well, but we see that Arisu, the main character, decides to go back into the games, and so he willingly goes back, consciously goes back into that collective unconscious, which again, Jung says that we can't actually do. Instead, it usually reveals itself to us. So we don't go to it, it reveals itself to us in symbolic ways. So I talked about things like dreams. So, for instance, a common one that every single person, I'm sure, watching this has had, if you haven't had this yet, you definitely will at some point, is that dream where you're falling, right? And that experience and sensation where you might even jolt awake right as you're about to hit the ground, or maybe you actually do hit the ground. And so that could be thought of as the collective unconscious, an experience that we all have. Or if we think of myths, a lot of our cultures have certain superstitions or myths around some kind of bad luck. So, for instance, in America, we have the little rhyme, step on a crack, break your mother's back, meaning if you step on one of the cracks in the sidewalk, the idea is that it would break your mom's back. Really doesn't make sense, but we were kids. But also, my parents are from West Africa, and in West Africa, they have a belief about your purse as women. If you put your purse on the ground, on the floor, that means that you're gonna be in poverty, basically, that you're not gonna have money. And so, most people in this area, or all people in this area, do not ever put their purse on the ground or the floor, right? So, different cultures and different ways of expressing the same idea, but still the same kind of archetype around some kind of bad luck happening. Now, it does make sense that Alice in Borderland would confuse this, or would have the idea that you can personally tap into the collective unconscious, because with Freud and the personal level of the unconscious, he did actively tap into it by way of psychoanalysis. So that included interpreting dreams, that included free association, so basically letting people just talk and talk and talk without interrupting them, and believing that at a certain point they're going to talk about their true drives, emotions, those repressed kind of feelings, and also through other means of uncovering repressed memories. So it is possible to tap into the personal unconscious, but again, Jung did not believe that that was possible for the collective unconscious. Another way this concept actually differs in real life, in psychology, is in Alice in Borderland, we see them all, like I just said, we see them all having the same experience. Like they physically have to go to a place and they physically experience playing the same games together and all of that. But like I was just saying too, for the collective unconscious, it's more symbolic, or it's really only symbolic. It's not that we're gonna have to go to the same place, like physically, to have the same experiences. I mean, think of the examples I gave earlier when it comes to, say, the hero archetype. So we have Odysseus from the Odyssey, who is a very different person and representation of a hero than Black Panther is, right? So it's not the exact same thing that we have to experience, but it's more so the idea of it, right? Like a hero can come in so many forms, and we see that in Alice in Borderland. The main hero is Arisu, although there's a bunch of others that pop up. And so that's also a difference, and something I see depicted a lot in other films that talk about personally tapping into some kind of collective unconscious, is that you basically all have to have the same experience, and that's not really the case. And so in hearing this, you might be on Freud's side and saying, I don't know if I quite believe all that Jung was saying, because it's really difficult to confirm, but also to deny this theory. I mean, it's kind of like the chicken or the egg. Like, do we have a lot of these same themes and ideas that we see in our dreams or in stories because it comes from this reservoir of shared experience called the collective unconscious and these archetypes? Or is it that things like religion or art or stories have done these themes enough that we see them continue to pop up. I mean, right now, that's a huge issue a lot of people have with Hollywood, for instance, that it just feels like the same thing is being repeated over and over again. Because a lot of these storylines work. Having the hero and the villain, that works. And so we see that over and over and over. So whether I believe in the collective unconscious is one thing, but it's so interesting to see the different themes, the different archetypes that are actually present in Alice in Borderland, which they probably didn't even realize. One of the big ones in season 3, but in general, is that of the trickster. So coming back to the trickster, and in season 3 they talk a lot about the Joker, and the Joker, at the base of it, historically, is a trickster. And what we see is with almost all the games that folks have to play, there's some kind of trick or some kind of twist that's involved that the game master works into this game purposely. And so that is a classic archetype. And another kind of classic archetype is the hero figuring out this kind of trick and foiling this plan. We see Arisu consistently figuring out these tricks and twists in the game, but also we see it too with Shishia. We see it with him a bunch of different times. So the one that comes to mind for me was I think it was the Jack of Spades one where they had to find the person who was offing the other people and pretending that they weren't. So he was using certain clues that he was seeing to figure out the tricks this person was using to trick everybody else. Another archetype that's huge in Alice in Borderland is the idea of fate, but more specifically, our control as people over fate. So the idea that you can choose to return to some kind of world or return to your old way of living, of being, or not. I mean, think of this like the Matrix. That's one of the classic examples. The red pill or the blue pill. Are you going to choose to go back to ignorance, or now that you've been enlightened, are you going to choose this path? Same in Alice in Borderland. After in season 2, once all the games are cleared, they give them a choice. Do you want to go back to your world and your way of life that you were living before, or do you want to stay and become a citizen of that country? And I won't spoil it, but also at the end of season 3, they have a similar choice of choosing one thing or choosing another that's based in fate. So this is a classic archetype that we see all the time, whether it be in different films, different cultures, different religions, even. So although the series was wrong in how they depicted the collective unconscious, which is to be expected because it's a series that's made to be entertaining, so a lot of times they're going to take liberties and be wrong about certain psychological concepts, but I think it's kind of funny how subconsciously they threw in different themes about the collective unconscious and these archetypes that actually truly illustrate how it works and are actually correct.
Welcome to the Borderlands.